I'm Leah, 19, female, and my parents sold my custom-built computer, the culmination of years of my life and savings, to buy my brother designer clothes. It wasn't just a machine, it was my future, my passion, and my escape. They sold it for a fraction of its value, and in doing so, they sold any illusion I had that I mattered as much as my brother. The fallout from that single act of betrayal didn't just create a rift, it carved a canyon so deep that no bridge could ever span it. This is the story of how I packed my bags and found my own value after my family decided I was worthless. To understand how my parents, Susan and Mark, could do something so callous, you have to understand the family's golden rule: Ethan comes first. My brother, 2 years my junior at 17, was the sun around which our family galaxy revolved. I was a distant, forgotten moon, occasionally catching a sliver of light but mostly existing in his shadow. This wasn't a recent development, it was the bedrock of our entire lives, a foundation laid with countless small, painful bricks of favoritism. I remember my 10th birthday vividly. I had been obsessed with astronomy, saving up my allowance for months to buy a small telescope I'd seen in a catalog. It was all I talked about. My birthday arrived, and my big gift from my parents was a box of art supplies. I was confused. I liked to draw, but it wasn't my passion. My mother, Susan, smiled and said, "We thought you could draw pictures of the stars, honey. Isn't that a wonderful idea?" Later that day, Ethan, who was 8, threw a tantrum because he wanted a new video game that had just come out. My father, Mark, left the party and came back an hour later with the game. I watched from the window as he handed it to Ethan, who immediately stopped crying and ran to the TV. My telescope fund was borrowed for the purchase. "We'll pay you back, Leah," my dad had said. They never did. The art supplies gathered dust in my closet. Another time, when I was 16, I won a regional science fair. My project was a small-scale water filtration system I had designed and built myself. The prize was a $500 scholarship and a certificate. I was ecstatic, running home with the trophy, my face beaming. I walked in to find my parents coddling a tearful Ethan. He had failed his driver's test for the first time. My victory was immediately sidelined. The entire evening was dedicated to consoling Ethan, ordering his favorite takeout, and listening to my dad promise him, "Don't worry, son, we'll pay for extra lessons. We'll make sure you pass next time." My trophy sat on the kitchen counter unnoticed. When I finally tried to show them my certificate, my mom glanced at it and said, "Oh, that's nice, dear. Now could you be a good sister and get Ethan a soda? He's had a very rough day." The $500 was absorbed into the family fund, which was just another name for the Ethan Fund. It paid for his driving lessons. The most telling incident happened just last year. I was working my first real job, a weekend gig at the local library, to save up for the initial parts of my computer. I had a specific savings goal, a chart on my wall I filled in every week. Simultaneously, Ethan decided he wanted to go on a school ski trip. It was expensive and non-essential, but he was the golden child, and his wants were treated as needs. My parents sat me down one evening, their faces a mixture of strained seriousness and practiced apology. They explained that things were a little tight and they needed to borrow from my savings to pay for Ethan's trip deposit. "It's important for his social development, Leah," my mother had explained, as if my own goals were just childish whims. "He needs to be with his friends." I protested, showing them my chart, explaining how long I'd been saving. My father used his classic line, the one that ended all arguments: "Leah, we are a family, and in a family we help each other out. Your brother needs help right now." The word need was a weapon in our house, and it was only ever wielded in Ethan's defense. My savings were taken, not borrowed. I had to start over. Ethan went on the ski trip, came back with a tan and a new sense of entitlement, and never once said thank you. These weren't isolated events, they were the pattern of my life. My achievements were nice, while Ethan's desires were needs. My hard work was a convenient resource to be tapped, while his comfort was a priority to be protected at all costs. I learned to stop sharing my passions with them, to keep my goals to myself, because sharing them only made them vulnerable. So when I started building my computer, I did it quietly in the sanctuary of my room. It became more than a project, it was my silent rebellion. It was the one thing in my life that was entirely mine, built with my own hands, funded by my own perseverance. I thought naively that because I had built it, because it was a fizzy Cal testament to my dedication, it was safe. I was wrong. I had forgotten the golden rule of our family: nothing was truly mine if Ethan needed something. To call it a gaming setup is to see only a fraction of what it was. To my parents, the words gaming and computer were synonymous with wasting time. They saw a glowing box and a monitor and wrote it off as a toy. They never once asked what I was doing, what I was learning, or what it meant to me. If they had, they would have known it was the most important thing I owned, not for its monetary value, but for what it represented and what it allowed me to do. The dream of this machine began when I was 15. I was using the clunky, slow family desktop for a school coding project, and I became fascinated with what made it work. I started reading articles online, watching videos about motherboards, CPUs, and graphics cards. A whole world opened up to me, a world of logic, precision, and infinite possibility. Building a computer wasn't just about playing games, it was about understanding the architecture of the digital world. It was a puzzle that I wanted to solve, a skill I wanted to master. Saving for it was a lesson in discipline. The money I earned from my part-time IT support job, which I got because of the skills I was teaching myself, went directly into a separate bank account. Every dollar from my library job, every birthday check from my grandparents, every single penny I could scrounge went towards that goal. I gave up going out with friends for movies, I packed my own lunch every day, and I wore the same clothes long after they went out of style. While Ethan was getting new shoes for every season, funded by my parents, I was meticulously comparing prices on RAM modules and cooling fans. The first part I bought was the case, a sleek black tower with a tempered glass side panel. For weeks it sat empty in my room, a monument to a future I was building for myself. Then came the motherboard, the CPU, the brain of the operation. I remember holding it in my hands, a tiny, intricate square that held so much power. It felt sacred. I installed it with surgical precision, following a tutorial video with rapt attention, my heart pounding with a mixture of terror and excitement. Over the course of 2 years, I assembled my dream piece by piece. A top-of-the-line graphics card that I bought secondhand from a fellow enthusiast, a full terabyte of solid-state storage for lightning-fast load times, a quiet and efficient power supply. Each component was the result of hours of research, budgeting, and sacrifice. The total cost came to just over $3,800. It was more than a computer, it was a diary of my determination. The tempered glass panel wasn't for showing off flashy lights, it was a window into my own hard work. Once it was built, it became the center of my universe. Yes, I played games on it. Those games were my escape, my social life. I had a close-knit group of online friends, people from all over the country who I talked to every night. They were more supportive and interested in my life than my own family. They celebrated with me when I debugged a tricky piece of code for my college class and listened patiently when I vented about another instance of Ethan's golden child treatment. In that digital space, I was Ethan's sister. I was Leah, the reliable teammate, the clever strategist. I was seen. But more importantly, the machine was my workstation. It was where I completed my assignments for my computer science degree. The powerful processor compiled my code in seconds, not minutes. The dual monitors allowed me to have research open on one screen and my programming environment on the other. It was an essential tool, as vital to my education as a chemistry student's lab equipment. I even used it for my part-time job, running diagnostic software and troubleshooting issues remotely. It was helping me build my future, both academically and professionally. It was my path to independence, a way out of the suffocating hierarchy of my family home. My parents saw none of this. When they glanced into my room, they saw me with a headset on, my face illuminated by the screen. They heard me talking and laughing with my friends and dismissed it as nonsense. "Still playing those silly games, Leah?" my mother would ask, her tone laced with disapproval. My father would just shake his head, muttering about getting a real hobby. They never saw the lines of code, the complex problem-solving, or the professional skills I was honing. They saw a toy, and because it was my toy, it was expendable. Its value was not measured in dollars or gigabytes, but by its relationship to me, and since I was second best, so was everything I held dear. The foundation of its existence, my sacrifice, my passion, my future, was invisible to them, and because they couldn't see its worth, it was easy for them to sell. The day it happened began like any other Tuesday. I had a long day of classes followed by a 3-hour shift at my IT job on campus. I was tired but content. I'd finally saved up enough to buy a professional-grade software suite for 3D modeling, something I wanted to get into, and I was looking forward to installing it. I walked through the front door around 7 p.m., kicking off my shoes and heading straight for my room, my sanctuary. The first thing I noticed was the emptiness. It was a physical void, a gaping hole in the corner of my room where my desk was. The space where my tower, my monitors, my entire world should have been was vacant. My black leather chair was pushed against the wall, looking lost and out of place. For a split second, my brain refused to process the scene. I thought, did I move it? Did I put it in the closet for some reason? It was a nonsensical thought, a desperate attempt to find a logical explanation for the impossible. Panic began to crawl up my throat. I dropped my backpack, its weight thudding against the floor. No, I whispered, my voice trembling. I walked over to the desk, my hand tracing the dust outline where my monitor stand used to be. The cables, the power cords, the display ports, the Ethernet cable were all gone, not just unplugged, but completely removed. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a temporary move, this was a removal. My heart started hammering against my ribs. I ran out of my room and found my mother in the kitchen, humming as she stirred a pot on the stove. "Mom," I said, my voice tight and high-pitched. "Where is it? Where's my computer?" She didn't turn around immediately. She just continued stirring, her movements calm and measured. "Oh, hello, dear, how was your day?" "My computer, Mom, where is it?" I demanded, the panic turning into a cold dread. She finally turned, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Her expression was one of mild annoyance, as if I were interrupting her with a trivial problem. "Leah, calm down, it's fine." "Fine, it's gone, my entire setup is gone. Did someone break in? Did we get robbed?" My father walked in from the living room then, holding the newspaper. He folded it neatly and placed it on the counter, his movements slow and deliberate. He was the one who spoke, and his tone was devoid of any emotion. "There was no robbery, Leah, we sold it." The words hung in the air, sharp and unbelievable. I stared at him, then at my mother, waiting for the punchline. I waited for one of them to crack a smile and say, "Gotcha," but their faces were completely serious. "You what?" I choked out, the word barely audible. "We sold it," my father repeated, as if stating a simple fact like the sky was blue or the grass was green. "We sold that computer thing of yours this afternoon." I felt the blood drain from my face. My legs felt weak, and I had to grip the doorframe to keep myself upright. "You sold it, you can't just sell my property. It's mine, I paid for it." My mother, Susan, stepped forward, adopting her patronizing, "We know what's best" tone. "Now, don't be dramatic. It was just a computer. Your brother needed help, and we had to make a choice." There it was, the justification I had heard my entire life. Ethan, it was always about Ethan. "Needed help?" I asked, my voice rising with disbelief. "Help with what? What kind of emergency requires you to sell my belongings without even asking me?" Just then, my brother Ethan walked down the stairs, a smug look on his face. He was holding a brand new designer shopping bag. He didn't even look at me. He just headed for the kitchen counter to show our mother his spoils. "Look, Mom," he said, pulling out a sleek, ridiculously expensive-looking jacket. "This is the one I wanted, and I got the shoes to match." It was like a scene from a nightmare. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity, the empty space in my room, my parents' calm demeanor, Ethan's new clothes. I turned to my father, my eyes blazing. "You sold my $3,800 computer, my workstation for school, my entire life savings to buy him clothes." My father, Mark, finally showed a flicker of emotion, irritation. "Don't use that tone with me, young lady. It was for his school's winter ball. It's a very important event. All the important students will be there. He needed to look the part. And we got a good price for it, $1,200. $1,200, they had sold $3,800 worth of carefully selected high-performance components for a pittance. They had been scammed, and they didn't even care. The number was an insult, a final declaration of how little they valued my work. The shock was quickly being replaced by a white-hot rage. "It wasn't just a computer," I screamed, my voice finally breaking. It was everything. It was my schoolwork, my job, my connection to my friends. It was years of my life you had no right. My mother just shook her head, a dismissive wave of her hand. Oh, Leah, stop it. You're being hysterical. Over a silly machine. You can use the family laptop if you need to do your homework. Family comes first. You should be happy that you were able to help your brother. Happy? She wanted me to be happy. I looked at her, at my father's stony face, at my brother preening in his new jacket, and I felt something inside me snap. The part of me that had always hoped, that had always tried to earn their affection, that had excused their behavior, simply died in that moment. I wasn't just their daughter, I was a resource. I wasn't a person, I was a line item in the family budget that could be liquidated to serve the golden child. The discovery wasn't just that my computer was gone. It was the discovery that in their eyes, I had never really been there at all. The moments after my outburst were filled with a thick, suffocating silence. My scream seemed to hang in the air, an ugly testament to the new reality of our home. I stood there, trembling, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I expected remorse, or at least a flicker of understanding. Instead, I was met with a wall of cold, unyielding justification. My father was the first to break the silence. He straightened his shoulders, adopting the posture of a man who believed himself to be the sole voice of reason in a world gone mad. There will be no more screaming in this house, Leah. Your mother is right, you are being hysterical. Hysterical, I repeated, my voice dripping with a bitterness I'd never dared to show them before. You steal from me, you betray my trust in the most profound way imaginable, and you call my reaction hysterical. It wasn't stealing, my mother chimed in, her voice dangerously calm. It was a family decision. We are the parents. What is in this house belongs to this family. We decided the money was better used to support Ethan's social standing. A good appearance at this event could open doors for him, lead to important friendships. She spoke of Ethan's future as if it were a fragile investment they had to protect, while my own future, which was quite literally powered by that machine, had been auctioned off for pocket change. Ethan, who had been quietly admiring his reflection in the shiny surface of the toaster, finally decided to speak. He didn't look at me but at our parents, playing the role of the innocent beneficiary. I don't see what the big deal is, he said with a shrug, his voice laced with the casual cruelty of the truly entitled. It's just a computer. You were always locked in your room on that thing anyway. Maybe now you'll be more social. That single comment felt like a physical blow. He wasn't just a passive participant in this betrayal, he was an active endorser of it. He saw my passion, my dedication, and my social life, which was simply different from his, as a character flaw that his good fortune had now fixed. He was glad it was gone. You have no idea what you're talking about, Ethan, I said, my voice low and shaking with rage. You have no idea about anything that doesn't directly benefit you. That's enough, my father boomed, stepping between us. Do not speak to your brother that way. He did nothing wrong. We made the decision. He turned his focus entirely on me, his eyes hard. The problem here, Leah, is your selfishness. You have always been selfish with your time and your money. You hoard it away for your little projects, never thinking about the family as a whole. For once, you were made to contribute something significant and you can't handle it. The irony was so staggering it almost made me laugh. I, who had my savings borrowed for his trips, who had my achievements ignored for his failures, who worked 2 jobs to fund my own education while he was handed everything, was being called selfish. I contribute, I said through gritted teeth. I buy my own clothes, I pay for my own college textbooks, I put gas in my own car. I have never asked you for anything for myself precisely because I knew you wouldn't give it. The money I hoarded was money I earned. My mother scoffed, crossing her arms. Working a few hours at the library is hardly a career, Leah. What you earned was pocket money. We provide the roof over your head, the food you eat. The least you could do is show some gratitude and be happy for your brother's success. His success, you bought him a costume. You think a jacket is going to make him successful. It's about image, she retorted, her voice rising. It's about fitting in, something you've never cared about. We had to act fast. The man who bought it was only in town for the day. He gave us cash on the spot. It was a perfect opportunity. A man who offered $1,200 cash for a nearly $4,000 rig knew exactly what he was doing. He had taken advantage of my parents' ignorance and their desperation to appease their son. They hadn't just sold my computer, they had practically given it away, and they were framing it as a savvy financial move. I looked from my mother's death and civ face to my father's righteous anger to my brother's smug indifference. It was a united front. In their narrative, they were the responsible parents making a tough choice for the greater good of the family. Ethan was the deserving child whose needs were paramount, and I was the selfish, ungrateful daughter who was making a fuss over a toy. There was no apology coming. There was no acknowledgement of my pain. My feelings were an inconvenience to them, a disruption to the comfortable story they had already written. They didn't want to hear that my silly machine was the epicenter of my academic life. They didn't want to know that my online friends were the only people who asked about my day. Admitting any of that would mean admitting they had done something horribly, unforgivably wrong. And in the Church of St. Ethan, the high priests Mark and Susan could do no wrong. I felt a profound and terrifying sense of clarity. I was completely and utterly alone in this house. I was not a daughter, I was an outsider with a temporary residence permit, and my lease had just been terminated. The argument was over because it had never really been a dialogue. It was a sentencing, and they were simply reading me the verdict. I turned around without another word and walked back to my room, the sound of their justifications fading behind me. The rage was starting to cool, replaced by something much colder and much more resolute. I spent the next 2 hours in my room, sitting on my bed and staring at the empty corner. I didn't cry. The shock had worn off and the hot anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a cold, hard stone of certainty in the pit of my stomach. The emotional storm had passed, and in its wake, the landscape of my life was irrevocably altered. I could see the path forward with a clarity that was both terrifying and liberating. I took out my phone and a notepad. I went online and methodically looked up the current market value of every single component that had been in my computer. The graphics card, the CPU, the motherboard, the RAM, the solid-state drives, the power supply, the custom cooling system, the professional-grade monitors, the mechanical keyboard, the ergonomic mouse. I listed them all one by one. I added the cost of the software licenses I had purchased. The final tally came to $3,847.50. I wrote the number down and circled it twice. This wasn't about the money anymore, not really. It was about the principle. It was about respect. It was about forcing them to see the tangible value of what they had dismissed so easily. They had reduced years of my labor and passion to just a computer. I was going to show them exactly what that computer was worth. Around 8:30 p.m., my mother knocked softly on my door. "Leah, dinner is ready." Her voice was gentle, a calculated attempt to smooth things over, to pretend the last few hours hadn't happened. She wanted to retreat to the familiar comfort of routine, to sit around the table and act like a normal family. I took a deep breath, folded the piece of paper, and put it in my pocket. I walked out of my room and into the dining room. My father was already seated at the head of the table, reading his tablet. Ethan was scrolling on his phone, a smirk still plastered on his face. The food was on the table, my father's favorite pot roast, a peace offering. I sat down in my usual spot, the silence stretching tautly between us. My mother served the plates, her movements unnaturally cheerful. "So, Ethan," she began, desperate to fill the silence, "did you tell your friends you're going to the ball? They must be so excited for you." "Yeah," Ethan mumbled, not looking up from his phone. "Jason is jealous of my new jacket." I let them talk for a few minutes, picking at my food without eating. I let the illusion of normalcy settle over them, let them think their strategy had worked, that I had calmed down and accepted my fate. When my mother was sitting and they had all started eating, I placed my fork down deliberately on my plate. The small clinking sound made them all look at me. "I've made some calculations," I said, my voice even and steady. It held none of the hysteria from before. This was a different kind of energy, one they hadn't seen from me before. My father sighed, putting his tablet down. "Leah, we are not discussing this again." "Oh, we are," I said, pulling the folded paper from my pocket. I smoothed it out on the table next to my plate. I have here an itemized list of every component, every peripheral, and every piece of software you sold this afternoon. The total replacement value is $3,847.50. I pushed the paper toward the center of the table. Ethan glanced at it and snorted. My mother refused to look at it. My father stared at me, his jaw tight. "And what is the point of this exactly?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous. "The point," I said, looking him directly. "Why in the eye is that you will be repaying me. You got $1,200 in cash for it. You can give that to me tonight as a down payment. The remaining $2,647.50 can be paid in installments." The silence that followed was absolute. Ethan actually put his phone down, his eyes wide with shock. My mother's fork clattered onto her plate. She stared at me as if I had grown a second head. It was my father who finally reacted, and he did so with a short, harsh laugh. "You're delusional," he said, shaking his head. "Absolutely delusional. We are not paying you a single cent. We don't owe you anything." "You destroyed my property," I stated calmly. "Property that was essential for my education and my job, you stole from me. This is not a request, it is a demand for repayment." "Demand," my mother gasped, finding her voice. "You don't get to make demands in this house, young lady, the audacity, after everything we do for you." "What is it that you do for me?" I asked, my voice still eerily calm. "You provide food and shelter, the legal minimum, but you don't support me, you don't respect me. You see me and everything I work for as a resource for your favorite child. That's not a family. That's a business arrangement where I am the only one who is constantly losing." "That is a wicked thing to say," my mother whispered, her eyes welling up with tears. They were not tears of remorse, but of indignation. She was crying because her authority was being challenged. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the plates jump. "I have had enough of this. You will apologize to your mother for your disrespect. The discussion is over. There will be no repayment. You are living under our roof and you will abide by our decisions. The money was used for the good of the family." "No," I said, my voice rising to match his, the cold calm finally cracking. "It was used for the good of Ethan. There is no good of the family in this house. It's just him, his needs, his wants, his feelings. I am just a ghost that pays for his ski trips and new clothes." I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the wooden floor. My heart was pounding, but I felt powerful. "You had a choice. You could have told him no. You could have told him to get a job and earn his own designer jacket. But you didn't. You chose the easy way out. You chose to sacrifice my future for his fleeting social status. You made your priorities clear." I looked at each of them one last time. My father, red-faced with fury. My mother, performing her role as the wounded matriarch. My brother, looking genuinely stunned that the family's orbit had been so violently disrupted. "You're right about one thing," I said to my father, my voice dropping back to a steely quiet. "I am living under your roof, but that can be changed." I turned my back on the dinner, on their shocked faces, and walked out of the room. The fallout wasn't just coming, it had arrived. And as I walked toward my bedroom, I knew with absolute certainty that I would not be sleeping in this house tonight or ever again. The dinner wasn't a confrontation, it was a farewell. The walk from the dining room to my bedroom felt like the longest journey of my life. Each step was heavy with finality. There were no more tears to cry, no more words to scream. The confrontation at dinner had been the final test, a last, desperate appeal to a court that had already passed its sentence years ago. Their reaction, the laughter and the rage, had not been a surprise, it was a confirmation. It was the permission I didn't know I was seeking. I closed my bedroom door behind me and leaned against it, the wood cool against my back. The silence of the room was different now. It wasn't the peaceful silence of a sanctuary, it was the hollow silence of an empty shell. The ghost of my computer of my past life lingered in the corner. I looked at the empty space, and for the first time I didn't feel loss. I felt a strange sense of lightness. It was gone, and soon I would be too. I didn't pack in a frantic rush. My movements were methodical, imbued with a purpose I hadn't felt before. I pulled out the two large duffel bags I used for camping trips. I didn't own a suitcase. Suitcases were for family vacations, and I was no longer part of this family. I started with the essentials, the things that were undeniably mine, untainted by their influence. My clothes, my textbooks for college, my laptop from school, a slow, basic machine, but now my only lifeline to the digital world. I packed my toiletries, my notebooks filled with code and ideas, and the small box of tools I had used to build the machine they had stolen. With every item I placed in the bags, I felt a layer of my old life sloughing off. I was editing my existence down to what was truly important. As I went through my desk drawers, I found old birthday cards from them, filled with generic, store-bought sentiments. I tossed them into the trash can without a second thought. I found the science fair trophy from when I was 16. I held it for a moment, remembering the sting of their indifference. I left it on the desk. It belonged to a girl who still craved their approval. That girl wasn't me anymore. The hardest part was the bookshelf. It was filled with fantasy and science fiction novels, books that had been my escape long before I built my computer. They were my friends on lonely nights. I couldn't take them all. I chose three: my favorite dog-eared paperback, the first one I ever bought with my own money, a gift from my online friends, and a collection of short stories my grandfather had given me before he passed away. He was the only one who had ever truly seen me, who had encouraged my fascination with how things worked. Taking something from him felt like taking a piece of his support with me. After about an hour, the bags were full. My room looked stark, impersonal. I had packed my life into two canvas bags. It wasn't much, but it was mine. Finally, I sat down at the now barren desk and took out a single sheet of paper. I thought about writing a long, angry letter detailing every slight, every moment of favoritism, every injustice. But what was the point? They wouldn't understand. They would just twist it into another example of my selfishness and disrespect. So I kept it simple. I wrote three short sentences. I am taking your advice. I will no longer be selfish and think only of myself. I am leaving so that I am no longer a burden on this family or a resource to be used for Ethan. I didn't sign it with love, I just signed my name, Leah. I placed the note in the center of the desk, right where my trophy stood. I took one last look around the room that had been my cage and my cocoon. I felt a pang of sadness, not for the family I was leaving, but for the one I never had. With a deep breath, I shouldered one bag and picked up the other. They were heavy, but it was a good weight. It was the weight of self-possession. I opened my door and listened. The house was quiet. They had likely finished dinner and retreated to the living room to watch TV, already trying to forget the unpleasantness, to erase me from the evening. I walked silently down the hallway, past the closed door of the living room and to the front door. I didn't look back. I slipped my feet into my shoes, unlocked the deadbolt with a soft click, and pulled the door open. The cool night air hit my face, and it felt like the first clean breath I had taken in years. I stepped outside and closed the door gently behind me, not wanting to give them the satisfaction of hearing it slam. As I walked down the driveway toward the street, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from my best online friend, Mark, who lived 2 states away. "You okay? Haven't seen you online." I stopped under a streetlight, the two heavy bags at my feet. I thought about what to type. My parents sold my rig. I'm homeless now. It all felt too dramatic, too unreal. So I just typed the truth: no, but I will be. I looked back at the house, at the warm lights glowing in the windows, a perfect picture of a happy family home. But it was a lie. It was a house, but it had stopped being my home a long time ago. I turned away and started walking, with no destination in mind other than away. I was scared, but for the first time in my life, I was free. That first night was a blur of fear and adrenaline. I walked for what felt like hours, the weight of my bags a constant, grounding reminder of what I had done. I ended up at a 24-hour diner, nursing a single cup of coffee until the sun came up. I used their spotty Wi-Fi on my school laptop to text the only person I could think of, a friend from one of my advanced computer science classes named Sarah. I kept the message brief, just asking if she knew of any cheap rooms for rent. Her reply came almost instantly. "Are you okay? Where are you?" When I told her my situation, she didn't hesitate. "Forget a room for rent. My roommate just moved out. You can take her room. Come over right now." I showed up on her doorstep looking like a refugee, and she welcomed me with a hug and a hot meal. Sarah didn't just give me a place to stay, she gave me a safe place to land. She listened to my story without judgment, her anger on my behalf a soothing balm on my own raw wounds. For the first time, I felt truly seen and validated by someone in my physical presence. Living with her, I began to see what a supportive home environment actually looked like. We supported each other's studies, split bills fairly, and talked through our problems with mutual respect. It was a revelation. My parents, it turned out, didn't react the way I thought they would. I expected frantic calls, angry texts, maybe even a police report. There was nothing. For 3 days, my phone remained silent. It was as if I had simply vanished into thin AI. And they hadn't even noticed. The silence was more damning than any angry message could have been. It confirmed that I was never their priority. I was an inconvenience that had finally removed itself. On the fourth day, my mother sent a single text message. Your father is very disappointed in your behavior. When you are ready to apologize for the scene you caused, you can come home. There was no concern for my safety, no asking where I was, just a demand for an apology. I stared at the message, the words blurring. They still didn't get it. They never would. I typed back a simple two-word reply, I'm not. Then I blocked her number. I blocked my father's number and my brother's number too. It felt like severing the final thread, a definitive clean cut. The months that followed were hard. I took on more hours at my IT job and found another weekend gig waiting tables. Money was tight, and my diet consisted mostly of instant noodles and cheap sandwiches. I was constantly exhausted, juggling 2 jobs and a full course load. I used the university's computer labs to complete my assignments, often staying late into the night, dreaming of the powerful, efficient machine I had lost. But with the hardship came a profound sense of pride. Every bill I paid, every meal I bought was a victory. I was surviving, I was independent, I was building a life from scratch, and it was entirely my own. Sarah and my online friends were my pillars of support. My online community even chipped in and sent me a used graphics card and a monitor, a gesture of kindness that brought me to tears. It wasn't top of the line, but it was a start. Piece by piece, funded by my own hard work, I began to build a new machine. It was slower, less glamorous than the first, but it meant so much more. This one was built not just with my savings, but with my resilience. About a year after I left, I received an email from a distant aunt. She told me that things at home had changed after I left. My parents had expected me to come crawling back within a week. When I didn't, a strange new reality set in. There was no one to quietly handle the chores I used to do. There was no one to blame for small problems. And most significantly, there was no secondary income to siphon off for Ethan's whims. They had to say no to him for the first time in his life, and he didn't handle it well. According to my aunt, the house had become a tense, unhappy place filled with arguments. They had lost their scapegoat and their safety net in one fell swoop. The good of the family had apparently included my silent, unacknowledged contributions more than they ever realized. Today, 5 years have passed. I graduated with honors and now work as a software engineer for a tech company, a job I love and that pays me well. I live in my own apartment, a bright, airy space that feels like home in a way that my parents' house never did. My new computer, which I built last year, is a powerhouse, a testament to my success. It sits in the corner of my office, a symbol not of what was taken from me, but of everything I was capable of building for myself. I have no contact with my parents or my brother. I have no idea if Ethan ever became successful or if that designer jacket opened any doors for him. I realized a long time ago that their lives are no longer my concern. Leaving them was the hardest and best decision I ever made. They sold my computer, but in doing so, they gave me my freedom. They showed me my own worth not by acknowledging it, but by forcing me to find it for myself, far away from the shadow of my golden brother. They thought they were just selling a machine, but what they really did was sell their only daughter, and it's a sale from which they will never recover the loss. So for anyone out there who feels invisible in their own family, for anyone whose passions are dismissed and whose worth is measured by what they can provide for others, I want you to hear this: your value is inherent. It is not determined by those who refuse to see it. Sometimes the only way to win is to refuse to play their game. Pack your bags, build your own future, and never, ever look back. After listening to today's story, perhaps it has raised some new questions in your mind. Every day on Reddit, new experiences and moments create fresh stories. We are all human. If you enjoyed this story, feel free to share it. Thank you for your time, and don't forget to keep an eye out for more stories coming soon.